je mehr ich nachgedacht habe, was ist eigentlich der einzige wichtigste Faktor, bin ich ganz klar aufs Wasser gekommen.
Nestle is drawing water from a spring or a well within the national forest, within public lands that are owned by the people of the United States. It's drawing that water and then it's diverting it in a pipe down several miles to outside of the forest.
Nestle has an expired special use permit issued in 1978 that expired in 1988. That permit allowed them to occupy national forest land with the infrastructure necessary to remove water. And they take anywhere from 50 to 150 million gallons a year, depending on certain conditions.
If I could increase it, I would. We feel good about what we're doing.
The Forest Service maybe is getting a pittance of what this water is worth. We're subsidizing a business that depletes that public land resource and that then creates a cost on down the line in its life cycle as well in the waste management cost.
The drought drags on, the watershed, grows drier. Why is a foreign corporation like Nestle being allowed to withdraw millions and millions of gallons out of our watershed?
It is shocking just how much water Nestle is pumping out of aquifers across California without permit. So, for example, in the Sacramento aquifer, they're drawing up to 80 million gallons per year for its one bottling plant in Sacramento.
So, this is a before and after view of what happened in the drought-stricken state.
Everybody in California is affected by the drought, but not Nestle.
Wasser ist ein Lebensmittel, so wie jedes andere Lebensmittel sollte das einen Marktwert haben. Ich persönlich glaube, es ist besser, man gibt einem Lebensmittel einen Wert, sodass wir alle bewusst sind, dass das etwas kostet und dann anschließend versucht, dass man mehr spezifisch für diesen Teil der Bevölkerung, der keinen Zugang zu diesem Wasser hat, dass man dann dort... Also Wasser ist natürlich das wichtigste Rohmaterial, das wir heute noch auf der Welt haben. Es geht darum, ob wir das normale Wasserversorgung der Bevölkerung privatisieren oder nicht. Und da gibt es zwei verschiedene Anschauungen. Die eine Anschauung, extrem würde ich sagen, wird von einigen von den NGOs vertreten, die darauf pochen, dass Wasser zu einem öffentlichen Recht erklärt wird. Das heißt, als Mensch sollten Sie einfach Recht haben, um Wasser zu haben. Das ist die eine Extremlösung. Ja, eine Möglichkeit.
Now, in case you didn't get all that, let me paraphrase what Breivik just said. According to him, water should be privatized and applied a price like every other resource on the planet. He even goes as far as suggesting that the idea that water's a right of all people is an extreme one. Whoa! Better watch out for those extremist human beings who dare assume that they have a right to something they can't live without. Guys, this is the same corporation that donated over $1 million to prevent GMO labeling in California. And furthermore, Nestle's been the target of an international boycott for some time. See, it's aggressively marketed baby foods and infant formula that has contributed to the deaths and suffering of children around the world. So the next time you reach for that bottled water, think about Nestle, the big corporation that's immensely profiting while sucking the world dry, leaving millions of people without a drop to drink.
They're after profit. They're predators, water hunters looking for the last pure water in the world.
For one tanker load, Nestle pays $10. Once bottled, the same water costs $50,000.
They've made tons of money.
What's legal and what's ethical and moral are two different things.
And at some point, this resource will run out.
I refuse to buy anything that's made by Nestle's. If I have to go hungry, I will.
But you might be surprised to learn that nearly every time you take a bite of that delicious sweetness, you have the hands of a child slave to thank. Yes, you heard me right. And the corporations most responsible for this horrendous practice are Mars, Hershey, and most of all, Nestle. The corporation's also known for their chocolate monopoly and the slave labor that goes along with it. Africa's Ivory Coast produces more than half of the planet's chocolate, and the conditions on these cocoa farms there contain some of the world's most abysmal conditions for child workers.
Shocking pictures of children working with machetes and hazardous chemicals. Some said they were held against their will, forced to work, and many told us they never get paid. UNICEF estimates that more than 200,000 children could be involved in some of the worst forms of child labor.
Yes, at least 200,000 children are enslaved on the cocoa farms in the Ivory Coast alone.
Workers get pulled into the water and just disappear. That's what Nestle has revealed about the string of horrendous abuse that is going on in its seafood supply chain starting in Thailand. We're told about forced labor, we're told about slavery, and all with Thai workers, immigrant workers, being pulled in to work on fishing boats and vessels with the promise, the lure of making money, but being forced into contracts and trapped in situations where they are then ending up working to earn and pay back more money than they can ever afford. Here's a quote from one Burmese worker on this particular incident. He said, "Sometimes the net is too heavy, workers get pulled into the water and just disappear. When someone dies, he gets thrown into the water."
I remember there was a whole investigation into the cat food that's under Nestle, Fancy Feast cat food. You know, the fish meal and the shrimp and stuff that's used in this is all used through slave labor. And you know, it's like when you start to think about it, and how these products by Nestle kind of end up everywhere, whether it's your cat's food or your imitation crab at your favorite sushi place or whatever it is. I mean, you're contributing to this, and it's really impossible not to. That's how embedded it's become in our society, and that in itself is nuts. That, you know, people are enslaved on these ships so that our cats could eat nice fancy cat food. It's extremely sad because these are people's lives that we're talking about. Oftentimes they're, you know, taken away from their families and they can't return, and they're literally chained to these boats a lot of the time. So it's extremely sad. And like you said, like that Burmese worker said, someone dies, they don't get a funeral, they just throw them off the ship, and no one really hears about them ever again.
So we have to wonder why it keeps happening again and again, Nestle. We've had problems, as you mentioned, over the cat food, problems with Arrowhead water, stealing water from the drought over here. We had problems in Ethiopia years ago with the breast milk being forced that caused the deaths of thousands of babies. So Nestle coming under fire once again, but trying to look like the good guys by outwardly coming out and revealing this information.
Well, that food that you're feeding your lovely dog might not be necessarily healthy for the dog. And a class action lawsuit has been brought against Nestle Purina, the maker of Beneful dog food, because thousands of people have been complaining online that the food has been leading to severe illness or death to their dog. And so now a class action lawsuit has been brought by Frank Lucido, a pet owner of Northern California.
He loved the water.
Lee Whalen shows me photos of her dachshund, Toby, who passed away last year. It's a loss she can't get over. He was even the ring bearer at her wedding.
He was my first baby.
But Toby died a few months after this happy wedding day, a victim, her vet said, of kidney failure.
He had a seizure, kidneys gave out, and he died in my arms.
In your arms?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shortly after his death, she says, she started seeing complaints on Facebook from other dog owners concerning Purina's Beneful dog food.
India's government is going full frontal against one of the biggest corporations in the world, and they are seeking damages of nearly $100 million from Nestle India for what they are calling unfair trade practices after the food safety regulators banned its hugely popular Maggi noodle brand in June for containing unsafe levels of lead. I have my beef with Nestle. These guys are the ones pushing for the bioterrorists. They're pushing for the privatization of water all around the world. And they have this practice of going into these poor countries, feeding them the worst of the worst, and profiting from it in these countries with high index of poverty, where people is in need of this type of quick food. They